How do you study your work like it's the last minute before the last minute? You know that moment before an assignment is due, or the night before an exam, or the morning before a presentation deadline, where you have this huge adrenaline rush to get your work done because you've been putting it off for so long. You find that your mind is just super focused on getting the task done in the absolute last minute. Now imagine how much more productive and efficient it would be if we had this hyper-focused adrenaline rush mode all the time when we're working or studying. So how do you achieve this? The obvious answer is to give yourself an artificial earlier deadline and plan ahead. For example, if today is Tuesday, your presentation is due on Friday, pretend like it's due on Wednesday and you'll automatically enter that hyper-focus mode. But honestly, that's easier said than done. That's because you can't just fool your brain into thinking it's due on Wednesday when deep down you really know it's actually due on Friday. So in this video, I'll share 9 tips on how to give yourself an artificial earlier deadline and plan ahead in order to be in this hyper-focus mode every time you start studying or working. First, we have the divide and conquer algorithm, which is derived from a fundamental concept in computer science, where you repeatedly break down a project or a problem into 2 or more sub-projects or sub-problems until they become simple enough to solve directly. For example, if you have to study for 5 exams that are all in 1 week, break it up by looking at each exam individually, then break down each exam into all the topics you need to know. Afterwards, break down each topic into the worksheets and problem sets you need to solve to understand each topic. So instead of having study for 5 exams by April on your to-do lists, you should have a list of all the worksheets and problem sets that you need to get done by April instead. Then set up a deadline or a due date for when you want each problem set to be done by. For example, if you have 15 problem sets that you need to get done in a month, you can set up your calendar in a way where you have a deadline every other day. Meaning that problem set 1 needs to get done by Monday, problem set 2 needs to get done by Wednesday, and problem set 3 needs to get done by Friday, etc. That way you can have this last minute hyper-focus mode consistently and not just the day before the exam. Other than school, you can also use this method when working on either work or personal projects. For example, when I was building my Happy project that could analyze your pee to give you information on your health, it can sound intimidating. But in order to get around that, I broke it up into its system functions like presence detection, urine collection, urine analysis, biodata output, and system cleaning. And then breaking it down even further, focusing on material selection, designing, and manufacturing for each system function. And finally, focusing on each category individually and setting up deadlines for each. Moving on, humans are weird in that we don't mind letting ourselves down, but there's no way we can let someone else down. For example, if you have to wake up at 7 in the morning for work, you're most likely going to do and you're not going to sleep through your alarm because you don't want to let your team down. But if you're just going to wake up at 7 a.m. to do your own work and there's no one else involved with your work, then you're most likely going to sleep through your 7 a.m. alarm and you're not going to actually do it. So as you create more aggressive deadlines for yourself, add a layer of accountability to make sure you get your work done by having more people involved. For example, study with a friend or plan to have someone review your work when you're done. Moving on, once you've broken down your larger projects or exams into individual direct tasks, you should expect things to go wrong. Expect that when you're working on a project or studying for an exam, you may not know how to solve that task or figure out that problem right away. So set up things that you would do when you're stuck. For example, going to office hours to ask your professor some questions. Next, although it may be the day before a very important deadline, sometimes we still may get distracted by our phones, so we need to understand how to break that distraction cycle. Because as you know, when you get stuck on a task, the first thing you're tempted to do is grab your phone to get a little dopamine hit from your favorite apps. We end up wasting so much time on these apps, and before you know it, hours have passed and we regret even touching our phone to begin with. Now, of course, you can just lock away your phone when you're studying or when you're working, but if that's too extreme for you, then one thing you can do is you can shuffle your most distracting apps on your phone. For example, when working, the most distracting things that I get tempted to do is scroll through TikTok, scroll through Instagram, or watch videos on YouTube. TikTok is definitely the biggest distraction to the point where every time I pick up my phone, my muscle memory makes me instinctively go to the TikTok app, even though that's not what I intended to use my phone for. I just somehow find myself on TikTok. So to increase friction and make accessing these apps a little bit harder, I'll just move where these apps are on my phone every once in a while. That additional barrier helps me break my distraction cycle. The desire to grab a snack is always very tempting right before you're supposed to start work or supposed to start studying. For some reason, our appetite decides to show up right before we have a long list of things we need to get done. But the real reason you want to go for that snack isn't because you're hungry. It's because when you're facing a hard task, you tend to need comfort or encouragement to help you go through it. and food kinda helps you do that in the short term. However, in reality, we don't really need a snack. We just need friends that we can talk to about our anxieties and that can relate to the amount of work that we have. But if your friend just happens to be a snack, that's a little bonus. Next, this may be an odd tip, but one thing you can try if you feel like you're putting off an important task is by adding other tasks to that day that are relatively more stressful. For example, if you need to get a lab report done, have that as your first task of the day, then have something like go to the dentist as your second task. The second one may be more unpleasant to you, but it will at least help you get the first task done by the deadline that you set for yourself. Take a shower, go for a drive, or even just sit in bed and stare at the ceiling. We usually have our best ideas when theoretically we're not supposed to be working at all. It might be because our mind is kinda scared of thinking, so that it waits until we're on a break to give out our most valuable thoughts. Just make sure to try and avoid the internet as much as you can when you're doing this, because the internet can just suck you in and prevent you from having your own thoughts or ideas. Moving on, there is a strong belief out there that in order to succeed, we need to put in a ton of work and a lot of effort. Although it may be true to some extent, it's become the standard for anyone to be seen as a successful person to say they worked really hard. Hearing this all the time makes us feel that procrastination is the thing holding us back, and that we can succeed if we can force ourselves to work harder. But in reality, simply working hard might not be the decisive factor. Because for example, someone can work for years and produce nothing good out of it, while someone else can be on a break for years and then maybe achieve something revolutionary in a few weeks. You've probably seen it in your classes where some people will put in very little effort, but they're just so naturally talented or smart that they're able to do so well in school with very little time put in. Whereas on the other hand, you'll have people who put in a lot of hours and work very hard, but still not really achieve nearly as well as the people who just are naturally smart. So knowing this can help you not feel so bad when you miss a deadline. And when you don't feel bad, then you can set up your deadlines a lot better. We sometimes use the fact that we have wasted a lot of time as a reason not to begin working on something. For example, if we did nothing for the first half of the day, it seems impossible that we can still have a chance to finish our work for that entire day. But you really shouldn't be embarrassed by the amount of time you wasted watching Netflix or scrolling through TikTok. What's done is done, and it's probably taught you a decent amount about your work ethic. For example, when I waste my time like this, I feel a little ashamed, and it gives me a sense of self-disgust that I use as motivation to go hard and really focus on my work. Anyways, I hope this video brought you value. If it did, check out this video where I talk about the traps that engineering students fall into, or check out that video where I talk about how to avoid burnout as an engineering student. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Peace!